Like, share, subscribe.
In the year of 2021, if you were to ask people who the best EFC fighter currently or the best MMA fighter in South Africa, you will all get the same answer, and the answer being dricus still knocks du plessis. Now, who is he? That's what we found out in this video. Just to give you some context, he is a former KSW middleweight champion and the current EFC middleweight champion. Now, without further ado, let's get started with this video. Now, EFC has had a lot of stars in the past, stars like Gareth McClellan, people like Brendan Lazar, Jeremy Smith, and so on. But one of the biggest and brightest stars is dricus du plessis, who was born January 14th, 1994, meaning in the year of 2021. He is currently 26 years old. He is an African professional mixed martial artist currently competing in the middleweight division for the EFC and the UFC. He started out small just like any other people, and he worked his way to the top. In EFC he had wins up until he had to face one of the best middleweight fighters in EFC history, Gareth McClellan. Now, Gareth McClellan was on a roll. Gareth McClellan was winning, and he had cemented himself as the best middleweight champion in the world today in South African mixed martial arts, obviously. But it came to a point where dricus du plessis had to face Gareth McClellan. Now, would this youngster be able to dethrone the unbeatable Gareth McClellan? That's where we try to find out. So now the event has come, and it is EFC 33, Gareth McClellan versus dricus du plessis. Now, Gareth at this point was the only person in EFC history to successfully regain his championship belt. Nobody has done it before, and at this point dricus du plessis was 20 years old. The year before, he made his EFC debut at the age of 19, and a year later he was fighting for the strap. Now, at this point, Gareth was a wrecking machine. No one could stop him. He beat people like Jeremy Smith, and anyone you'd put in front of him, he would kick their ass and he would beat him. Now, would the undefeated dricus du plessis be able to win the championship, or will he suffer his first loss? Two men got back inside the cage. The two men fought it out, and at the end of the day, Gareth McClellan had won the match. There was no doubt that Gareth was going to win. I mean, dricus du plessis didn't have that much experience. Gareth was the legend, and people knew that Gareth was the one who was going to walk out with the victory. You know, the favorite odds were on him instead of dricus du plessis, and dricus du plessis suffered his first loss. But when you have your first loss and when you get down, there's only one way to go, and that way is up. At this point, dricus du plessis started winning again. He even won the welterweight championship. At this point, he had 10 wins and 1 loss, but he was up for the biggest challenge of his life, as he was going to take on UK's Yannick Bahati at EFC 63. In 2017 was an interesting year, as this was the biggest fight in EFC history, and you know what, a lot of people like to trash Yannick Bahati, but I feel like he's responsible for this, as he brought a lot of attention to the EFC. He did a lot of bad mouth trash talking, and he said a lot of bad things. Even people were calling him a Conor McGregor ripoff. But whatever you say, however you hate the guy, you have to admit that he brought some eyes to the product. It was UK's Yannick Bahati versus dricus du plessis. This was dricus du plessis' moment to win the middleweight champion, and if he was able to win the championship, he would be a 2-division champion. Was this possible? The show came in, it was packed. It was as if the show was sold out, and dricus du plessis was able to win the championship, becoming a 2-division champion. And at that point, he was one of EFC's biggest stars, and people saw him as one of the very best in the EFC middleweight division. And a lot of questions arise. Can dricus du plessis beat the guy who took his first loss to, which was Gareth McClellan? Unfortunately, we never found out if these two went head-to-head again. Would dricus du plessis be able to defeat Gareth McClellan, who at this point was his only loss? But as he beat Yannick Bahati also worked for a promotion called KSW, and now all of a sudden KSW had contacted dricus du plessis. It's as if Dricus du Plessis had garnered the attention of KSW promotion over in the UK. Now Dricus du Plessis went in there, and on his first fight there, he faced the middleweight champion in Roberto Soldic. I mean, why would you give him a championship opportunity on his debut? It's as if they thought that Dricus du Plessis could not hang with the very best. On his first fight, he defeated him, winning the KSW middleweight champion. But then there would be a second fight in which Dricus du Plessis would encounter his second loss. From here on, Dricus du Plessis stayed in KSW by beating none other than KSW's Boris Mankolsi. I'm sorry, but I cannot pronounce that name. From there on, a lot of people were interested in Dricus du Plessis. He got offers from each and every single place, and EFC allowed him to go to these places, but he had problems as KSW wouldn't let Dricus du Plessis go to places that offered him contract. He was offered deals from PFL, Ryzen, 4-fight deal from the UFC, which he couldn't take the deal because KSW wouldn't allow him. But eventually, I believe his contract went over, or they finally allowed him to go to the UFC. Now Dricus du Plessis at this point has done a lot. 2-division champion, won the EFC middleweight champion and the EFC welterweight champion. He went over to KSW to win the middleweight champion. It was time for him to go to the big leagues, to the UFC, and only a handful of people had done this at this point. His first fight would obviously be in the middleweight division, and he would take on Perez. Perez was also known for his famous, Joker face paint he did at the weigh-ins, and for this fight with Dricus du Plessis, he brought back the face paint, and he maybe thought this would intimidate Dricus du Plessis, or maybe it was just for his entertainment. But the fight finally came in. People thought, the hype around Dricus du Plessis would die out. He wouldn't be able to do it in the UFC, just like many Africans have failed before. But he went in there, and on the first round, he was able to knock out Perez, and he proved that he is the best fighter in the history of South African MMA. He was scheduled for a second fight, but that couldn't happen. And right now, there he is waiting for another call from the UFC. You wonder when that will happen. The second fight couldn't happen because of the COVID restrictions. Can't wait to see him in the EFC, as the EFC have also returned. Right now, Dricus du Plessis is, I believe, an owner for a gym called CIT in Hatfield, which you can go to train with the very best, because people right there is Dricus du Plessis, Neil du Plessis, people like Michiel Opperman, and they even have, people, the fighters that are training, they're even on EFC. People like Cameron Simon, who is a bright young star who's won all of his matches. He is 3-0. Right now, Dricus du Plessis is doing well for himself. And currently, as we speak right now, 9 May 2021, the recording of this video, Dricus du Plessis is the best MMA fighter in all of Africa.